Alright, liquored up enough. Here we fucking go. 1991, was about 10 years old, poor as dirt and lived out on a farm. By poor as dirt I mean we literally had nothing, no TV, no cameras, and besides a radio, nothing. We lived in a really rural area in the northernmost part of Wisco, no neighbors for more than a few miles. At home alone because my mom and dad needed to go into town to get some supplies, listening to some shit I can't remember when someone bangs on the door. Strange, since we normally don't get people out here. Go to the door, there is a fucking crack in the door. Motherfucker hit it so hard there was a crack in it. Peek through the crack to ask him what was going on. He was naked and covered in blood, pick related. Ask him what the fuck he was doing on our doorstep. I got in a car accident. Can you let me in to call someone to pick me up? The dude's tone was flat, kinda like how a computer sounds when it speaks. Tell him to get the fuck out before I go all mafia on his ass. He smiles and says that I won't regret it if I let him in. Get freaked the fuck out and run upstairs to get my dad's shotgun. Was a small kid back then, so it was heavy to hold and almost knocked me flat when I first shot it. Motherfucker was reaching through the crack to try and get in. Shoot his ass. I knew I hit him. Because he pulled the fuck back and started running. Looked out of the crack and got ready to shoot him again when I see him running into the woods, on 4 fucking legs. Not how a person walks/crawls on 4 legs. This dude was like a fucking bear or something by how he ran. Too scared to shoot him again. Parents come home to me crying in the corner with the gun next to me. Dad freaks the fuck out when I tell him what happened. He said he can have some of the ice cream he got for me while he went out and tried to look for the dude. Came back the next day and immediately called my uncle who lived in Milwaukee to come and pick me up. The night before my uncle picked me up, I was doing my chores and checking on the cows. The same dude was in the barn, eating one of the stillborn calves. Nope. Go back to the house and tell my dad that some guy was helping himself to a burger in our barn. Goes out there with a gun and threatens to skin the dude if he comes back. The guy just laughs and walks off into the woods. Never came back.
Alright, X, you probably won't believe me, as I'm not even sure myself if I believe it, but I'm going to tell you this: you guys are the only people who won't immediately dismiss my story as insane. But you don't have to stay here, so keep that in mind. I've written this all out in advance for both your and my own convenience, and there are too many aspects to try and take the time to post this as I write it. My family has a history of mental illness. This is what I'm going to start off with, as a bit of a disclaimer to you all. My uncle killed himself, my grandfather blew his own brains out, my mother is bipolar, my father's father was a rapist, the list goes on. So anyways, this all starts off about 2 months ago on the last day of the semester for college. Now I normally get a ride home as the walk is a bit long, but today my mother, she picks me up and I live with her. I know, couldn't use her car at the time due to repair issues. So I was stuck walking this time. The path I went on is a bit of a backway on a gravel road surrounded by trees. I decided to go this way because it was about the same distance and it was hot, so I figured the trees would provide me with some shade. So off I go on my merry walk in sandals, the rocks on the ground getting stuck in my toes and stabbing my feet. After what I estimate was about 15 minutes I accidentally stepped into a muddy hole, and promptly yelled out a multitude of obscenities. So now I had to not only walk home, but walk home with my leg covered in mud. Continuing, I trudged on with drying mud on my foot only to, yet again, walk into another hole. After this point, things started to become familiar. Yes, you know where this is going. The trees were the same, the road was the same, and yet again I'd stepped into the same mud hole. Now as I frequently visit X, my first thought was that this was something paranormal. Although I admit I was disturbed. I trudged back down the path in the hopes that I'd find myself at the college again. To my dismay, I did not. Instead I had come across the same mud hole from the opposite direction. So at this point I was starting to panic. Many thoughts began racing through my head. Would I be stuck in this strange loop and die there? Was there something waiting for me in the trees? Am I going insane? Immediately ran down the path as fast as I could. I even left behind my bags and books and ran with every ounce of energy that I had. As expected, I ran past my own pile of junk several times before I decided to sit next to it and try to rationalize everything out. I stayed vigilant of my surroundings and made a point to look around me for anything at all that stood out. At this point I thought, what if I just go through the trees here? And I began thinking of this all as a game. Looking for any loopholes or solutions out of this. So I walked through the seemingly endless stream of trees only to end up on the other side, staring at my books. I have severe anxiety and this entire situation was making me sick. I stopped and blew my entire lunch up before sitting down again. Finally, in my desperation, I tried to climb one of the trees. I made it a decent way up before promptly falling from it and landing on my back. It ached, but I was okay. So I laid there, feeling like I was going to die. I then fell asleep. After an unknown period of sleeping, I awoke to a man standing over me asking if I was okay. I looked around and then looked at him with a terrified look on my face. He asked me if I needed to go to the hospital, and all I said was, "No. Just take me home." Although he was admittedly concerned, he let me pack my stuff up in his truck and he drove down the path. Only this time, instead of ending up in a loop, we actually came out of the loop onto the next street, and he drove me home. I grabbed my stuff and walked into my house. I expected my mom to ask me why I'd been gone so long, but she simply said, "Hello," and continued on about her business. I looked at the clock in the living room and found that it had only been 30 minutes since I left the college. I was both exhausted and afraid, so I went into my room, locked the door and laid on my bed thinking about what had just happened. So I went to sleep and woke up the next day, the first day of summer for me. I was too afraid to tell anybody about what had happened, and decided to ignore it and hope that it had all been a very vivid hallucination. The next week or two went by fairly uneventful, and although that whole scenario was still in my mind, I was starting to think that the heat was just causing my mind to play tricks on me and that things were okay. Lol, too bad for me. I was either very wrong or my brain decided it was time to fuck me in the ass. Strange events began happening, not as over the top as the first event, but unsettling nonetheless. I saw extremely dark figures roaming the halls. Sometimes out of the corner of my eye, other times they walked right in front of me before disappearing, and every time nobody else in my house could see them. It began happening more and more frequently, and I even considered telling this story to you guys about a month ago, but I figured I'd be disregarded as a troll. As it went on, even stranger things began occurring. I began losing chunks of time. I'd finish lunch and less than a minute later I'd look out the windows to see darkness, and my mom would be preparing dinner. Then events began elongating. I went into my room one afternoon and laid there for a good couple of hours just staring at the ceiling before taking what felt like a several-hour nap, and when I awoke I looked at the clock to find it had been no more than 5 minutes. More recently, the most disturbing and unsettling of these events began happening. I had still told no one about what was going on, so I tried to act fine in front of my family. I was sitting down, eating dinner, and when I finished I walked down the hall to my room silently. Before closing my door, I saw, and I am absolutely fucking certain of this, myself walking down the hall. I was looking at myself walk down the hall, and I saw myself walk into the bathroom. I ran down, opened the bathroom door to find nobody in there. I ran into the dining room to find everybody gone, no food on the table, and though it should have been nighttime, the sun was rising and it was morning. This began occurring more often, and even worse, I'll end up in places I don't remember being and with no clue of when I was there. I'll be doing one thing and suddenly I'm no longer there and am somewhere else. On one occasion I was on my laptop before suddenly finding myself standing in Walmart, and I saw myself walking away in front of me with a carton of groceries. I went up to a cashier and asked them if I'd just checked out my groceries with them, and they said I had. I ran out of the store and found my mom in the car, with groceries packed in the car already, and she turns to me and tells me to hurry up and get in the car like nothing had happened. My life has become one horrifying event. Days bleed into each other, things that have already happened happen again. I see copies of myself or even other people walking away from something while the other is still doing it. It's like time itself is collapsing on itself and I'm the only one who notices. I'm frankly at the end of my rope and have no idea what the fuck is going on. The only reason I think that I can keep this thread going is because I've been able to find certain times where things remain fairly normal. However, everything is slowly becoming more and more bizarre and I'm scared about what's gonna happen next. The only reason I'm even telling you guys all this is because I have to tell someone or I'm going to kill myself. I might do it anyways. Like I said, you guys will probably not believe any of this. All I know is that whether this is real, or I'm just going insane, I don't think I'll put up with it any longer. Hopefully killing myself will at least go without any issues.
Okay, I'm not sure if anyone else out there will find this story very creepy, but it's certainly the scariest thing that's ever happened to me, so I might as well share. At this point, I like to think that I've been around long enough to realize that there's more crazy shit happening in the world than their explanations, and I'd say this falls into that heading. If anyone out there can actually explain everything away, please do. It would make me feel a whole lot better about the situation. A few years back, I was enlisted in the US Coast Guard, hoping to save lives, stop bad guys, and just be an all-around hero, the kind of mindset that most younger guys have at that time. The reality of what I'd gotten myself into was a lot more frustratingly mundane than what I'd hoped for and consisted of a lot more cleaning field daying, running basic training drills, and just constantly trying to keep various qualifications up to standard, as well as gain new ones. When this story took place, I was still pretty new to the entire thing. I was in for less than a year and I'd been stationed at a little small boat station on the coast of Maine. I'd grown up in a small fishing town, myself, so I was used to having nothing to do but work, drink, and trying to convince the least unattractive girl at the bar to go home with you. I was hoping for something a lot more exciting, some hotbed of activity like the coast of Florida. That's pretty much the reason why I always volunteered to get underway whenever the boat was going out for literally anything. It didn't hurt that because I was still new and not actually boat crew qualified that all the extra time helped me with all my required knowledge, as well as making me look good in front of command. So that day we were going to get underway to practice some Becky drills, some basic boat crew stuff for me, and generally just spend most of the day out on the water making sure we were using some hours. It was a Saturday, so the command was nowhere in sight, and the OOD was a second-class bosun's mate named Rivard. He decided it was better to get a few of us out on the 47-foot motor lifeboat than just doing some sleep-inducing classroom training. Bump. So, the crew consisted of myself, who was a break-in, BM2 Rivard, acting engineer was a third-class MK named Ford, a chick BM3 named Brown, another non-rate break-in named Kovac. All of them were pretty good guys and dependable sailors, so it was a good crew on a good day with little wind and no predicted bad weather, even if it was unseasonably cold for November. What a lot of people don't seem to realize is that there is a lot more coastline out there considered haunted than they think. Hell, there's probably just as much of it out there as there are haunted houses or whatever, between all the harbors and rocky coastal areas. Think about it, if a house gets haunted because something bad happened and people died there, then what about all the countless lives lost in a watery horror over the centuries with downed vessels, battles, mutinies, pirating, storms, and everything else? One stretch of coast could potentially have seen more death and murder than any given area of the land it surrounds. There's no shortage of tall tales to be told if you can find an old soul talkative, or drunk, enough to really open up. Not all of them about the other side either. There have always been tales of like things out in the deeper waters, everything from a kraken to serpents, to mermaids and sirens. And the important thing about stories like those is that they were all based on some little bit of truth. A kraken can be replaced with a colossal squid and the story wouldn't skip a beat. I'd heard stories about there being a place in our AOR that was supposedly a place where all of the above had happened. It was a small natural cove that couldn't have been more than a mile or two square. Everyone at the station had heard something along those lines, but hardly anyone actually bought into it. Mostly we just jokingly bring it up in a mock spooky voice when a crew was about to get underway. Just basic fucking around with each other. Nothing ever actually happened in the history of the area and we didn't expect anything to. Which is why BM2 Rivard decided we should live dangerously, as he put it, and head out that way for some of our training. The cove was a little ways out, about 45 minutes one way. On the ride out we pretty much just joked around and had fun with going over some basic book knowledge. The BM2 was laid back like that. It was pretty chilly out, about 42 degrees with a water temp about the same or a little lower, so we were in out full dry suits, which made it a little harder to move around, but it did make sure we didn't have to worry much about the chill in the air. Anyway, when we reached the mouth of the cove, Ford threw the life ring off the side and made a mock scream for help. Looked like we'd started man overboard drills. It was my job to maintain visual of the ring and keep shouting its location in relative degrees until the boat could swing around and come in for a pickup. But it was just a drill, so I was trying to have fun with it, so after about the 5th time I yelled out of position, I turned back to look at BM2 and say, "You get that yet?" in a sarcastic tone, but when I turned back around, the ring was gone. It just wasn't there anymore. Now, these things are designed to be seen. Not only is the ring bright orange, but it has a floating LED light set to flash so many times per second connected to it with a bit of bright yellow line. If you lose it for a second, it's not hard to find again. Nor was there much wind at all at the time, so it couldn't have really gotten very far from where it was. The water was pretty calm for the ocean. So after a few seconds of not being able to see the ring and not yelling out any location, Kovac comes over and asks what was up, if I was trying to piss someone off with not taking this seriously at all. So I tell him I lost the ring, and I shout back at BM2 that I lost visual on the ring. Then after a few minutes, both Kovac and I still can't find it. The rest of the crew comes up to see if we're blind or just retarded, but they obviously can't find it either. I tell them I saw it perfectly 1 second. Then when I turned around I just lost visual completely, but they all thought I was lying and that I must have never had a visual and wanted to make myself look less bad if I said I was paying attention at one point. Even BM2 Rivard didn't seem to believe me, saying that life rings don't just sink, that they're actually made to do the exact opposite, and that I'd probably have to explain to the XPO why our 47 is missing a ring now. I called bullshit on that, but he didn't want to hear it and just wanted to get on with the training. I was pretty pissed at the fact I was basically getting in trouble for lying, so I didn't really notice at first the slight change in the sky. Kovac asked me if I noticed how the clouds seemed to be getting a bit darker as we went into the cove, but I told him there isn't supposed to be any rain or snow or anything, so it's probably just a little overcast that'll probably let up in a bit. I don't know, man. Isn't overcast normally more just gray? He had a point. The clouds did seem darker, more like a thunderhead in color, but like every cloud was a mini thunder cloud. I told him he's just letting the stupid stories about this place get to him. What are you, some kid afraid of bedtime stories? Asking that kind of shut him up about it, but between the clouds and losing a life ring out of nowhere, I had to admit I might have been feeling a little creeped as well. So anyway, we were in the cove with Ford and Brown having me practice working the tow bit, and Kovac was with BM2 going over the nav equipment and piloting the boat. The sky had stayed that unsettling blackish color, and I could feel a weird, I guess you just have to call it a feeling in the air. Like something wasn't quite right, but there was nothing obviously wrong at the same time. The only thing I could compare it to is if you've ever been standing outside during the eye of a storm. I saw Brown shiver a little and swore, following it up with a rhetorical question about wasn't it supposed to be good weather today. Being one of the new guys, I didn't want to let that go. I always get ragged on and I needed to give my share back when I had the chance. I didn't take you for the damsel in distress type. You letting some clouds and scary stories get to you now? She shot me one of those sarcastic grimaces people give and shoved me in the arm. Just at that time, though, the engines jerked to a complete stop. Just as she shoved me, there was a heart-sinking grinding noise, and the sudden jerking of the boat mixed with the shove was almost enough to send me over the taffrail. The thing is though, that while I was leaning over the rail, thinking I was about to go over, I could have sworn that I saw a face just under the water. It was so quick that I almost thought I didn't see anything, but I definitely saw what I knew was a pale face, with eyes as black as the clouds were becoming. I was taken aback and still staring into the water when Brown came over and grabbed my arm and asked if I was okay, and said we need to go meet up with BM2. I was a little shaky in my response, but now that my nerves were calming down from almost falling in, I realized that I had just seen my own reflection in the water, and that it wasn't anything more than that. Mentally scolding myself for being so stupid and quick to assume, I went with Brown to muster up with everyone else. Ford had already gone down into the engine compartment to see what was going on, while the rest of us were in the cabin with BM2. So far no one knew why the boat stalled, but there was some more good news to go with what we already knew. All of the electronics died when the engines went. Plotter, radios, everything. At first I thought we were screwed and couldn't contact the station, but I remembered that probably all of us had our cell phones on us, even if we weren't supposed to. So I asked the BM2 if he'd called in about our situation out here yet, and sort of gave a short chuckle and told everyone to check their phones or anything else electronic we might have. Well, that sent an alarm through me and I knew what I'd see before I took my phone out. It was dead. Well, great. I'm super glad this is happening. I had to comment. BM2 told me to cut that shit and to make ready the anchor. He said that he'd just done an ops and position check less than 10 minutes before, so they won't even try to contact us for another half hour, which means it'll be up to a few hours before anyone gets out here to pick us up. I made my way forward to the bow and started rigging the anchor with some line. I toss the anchor over and start paying out line, and I hear what sounds like something swimming along the surface of the water. I stop with the line and do a quick look around me, and I only see small wakes around the boat but nothing else, no seal or anything like I expected. I'm starting to feel pretty eerie at this point, so I just want to finish anchoring and get back off the bow, when the line I'm holding is tugged from my hands. It was just a quick jerky tug, enough to make me wonder what the hell just happened when the rest of the line starts getting pulled into the water really fast. It's going to fast and I'm so freaked and confused that most of the rest of it's gone before I can even think to move. I managed to wrap the end of it around the Samson post and throw on a few figure eights when whatever was pulling us ran out of line. There was a sickening lurching noise as the entire boat got jerked bow first at a 45-degree angle downward. Once again, I almost went over. At that point I'm like, fuck this, and scramble my ass off the bow, but I did notice the Samson post is all bent to hell now before I'm off there. The sky's pretty much back now in the cove, but there's still daylight somehow. Kind of like the opposite of a sun shower. All I could think at the time was that they used to call sun showers the devil beating his wife, and what the hell would call this. So I go into the survivors compartment where everyone's gathered, and I'm just in time to have Miss Ford's rundown of the engines but hear him complaining about us playing music at a time like this. Brown asked him what the hell he was going on about, that we didn't even have anything electronic working to play music with, but Ford was still going bullshit. I know you were playing some kind of music, I could hear it down in the engines. Just then everyone noticed I was there, and BM2 wanted to know exactly what the fuck happened while I was up there. I told him exactly what fucking happened, and twice that day I was called a liar. Fuck it, I said, let's go up there and I'll show you I'm not lying. And lo and behold, there was the post, all bent and messed up with barely any line left on board to secure the anchor. BM2 got a kind of worried look on his face, that matched everyone else around me. I heard the sound of swimming again. This time I didn't turn to try to see anything, I just waited a second and asked if anyone else heard it this time. But Ford cut off any response with loudly telling everyone he can still hear the goddamn music, like someone singing long notes, not even having much of a fucking tune. We all kind of look at each other for a second before Brown says it in K3. There isn't any music. No one hears anything. Just as he starts to say bullshit again, wham. The boat rocked. We all look at each other, scared shitless. Wham again. We all come to the same conclusion and book it the hell back indoors to the survivors compartment. As we were scrambling along the side of the boat, one more wham and Kovac almost fell over, but Brown grabbed him and steadied him. Once we were all indoors, the pounding stopped. After a minute or two of silence waiting for it to happen again, Kovac says okay, everyone realizes that was something hitting us. Intentionally. Right? BM2 tells him to shut up, and that we don't need anyone to make things worse right now. He does say that there's clearly something up right now and that we need to take the right precautions. He told Ford to go up and check the anchor line and make sure it's even a little secure, and for the rest of us to prep some pyro. He's going to check the radios one more time, and when they still don't work, we'll need to send off some flares. So Brown, Kovac, and I break out the pyro kit and start going over it all, making sure it's all still good. It obviously was, we just needed something to occupy ourselves. Brown asked me what I think is going on. I tell her I have no idea, but I've got the worst feeling right now. That things might a lot worse before they get better, you can feel it in the air. BM2 comes back and says everything's still shot just like he thought. He told me to up and get Ford, because it should not take that long to check on a line. I had to agree, he's been up there way too long unless something was up. I called his name as I was coming up to the bow, but when I got there he wasn't up there. I thought that was weird, but that maybe he just went around the other side as I was coming up. So I circle back around and check for him on the fantail and didn't see him. I get into the survivors compartment with everyone else and he isn't there, so I ask if he's in the engine room. BM2 asked me what I'm talking about, didn't I find him on the bow? At that point I realized things had just gotten worse and tell everyone to go topside because we must have a man overboard. We all rush up and start yelling his name and looking for any movement in the water. BM2 has the binoculars out and starts doing a search for Ford. After close to 15 minutes we didn't find anything more than we had before we started searching. BM2 is clearly frustrated and pissed, started blaming me for wasting everyone's time because he's not in the water. I tell him that there's nowhere else he could be, because if he went into the engines he would have seen him himself, and if he were in the cabin bridge, I would have seen him when I went around. He just continued going off saying that Ford was wearing bright fucking orange and an inflatable PFD, he didn't just fucking sink. At the point I remembered the anchor line and my stomach turned. I thought to myself, no, he didn't just sink, not on his own. But BM2 just went for the pyro saying something like fuck this. And fired off a parachute flare. I was left standing there, putting things together in my head. The face I thought I saw, the anchor line being pulled away from me, whatever it was ramming our hull. And the sound of something swimming. The same sound, I realized then, that I could still hear now. Something was going on here, and it was more than just ghost stories and weird feelings. Something was here with us, something was in the water. And it wasn't exactly hiding. I snapped up what you all would refer to as a basic flare, the kind they show in the movies that you just hold and wave around while it burns. I told the BM2 and everyone else to come with me over to the taffrail and just watch. I dropped the flare in the water so the burning end was facing us as it went. It went a bit more slow than I anticipated, but within a minute or so we couldn't see the light from it anymore. Nothing. Quickly, I grabbed another one and did the same thing. Kovac started to ask what I was doing, but I said to just shut up and watch because the sound of swimming was still there. And then, just before the light faded, we saw a shadow swim over the light. It was big enough to eclipse almost the entire time the flare was sinking just by swimming by. We all backed the fuck up and went down into the compartment. Everyone was scared, but BM2 looked like he was scared shitless, like his skin had turned the same shade as a piece of drawing paper. He just kept whispering, "We can't be here, we have to go, we need to leave, we can't be here anymore," and other things similar to that. I didn't disagree with him, either. The first thing I thought of to do was to cut the anchor line. I'd rather drift aimlessly than have a physical tie to whatever was down there, not to mention continue to be a sitting duck. BM2 had clearly gone bye-bye, so I told Kovac and Brown what I'd planned to do and for them to sit tight. I'd be right back. I only had my small boat crew knife with me, so I knew it might take a minute or two to completely cut the anchor loose. So I went up to the bow as fast as I could and went to work cutting us loose from whatever was there with us. I was about halfway through the line when wham! We were hit again. Fuck, it's like whatever's down there knows when we're vulnerable. Wham again, and I still had a way to go before I was done. Wham! They were getting more frequent now and more forceful. That last one rocked me back on my heels. Almost done now, just a few second wham wham. 2 right in a row, fuck. Almost there wham. Again, but I was done now, we were loose and I could book it back to the compartment, just need to make it past the side of the boat and wham. I was in the water. 3rd time's the charm. As soon as I was in, I realized I could hear music now, too. It sounded like someone singing long, tuneless notes. Like if a person were to try to sing a whale's song. When I saw it, I was out of my mind terrified. It was something just below the surface, not quite breaking the water. The only coherent thought I can remember right then was confident, and in hindsight, that was because whatever was coming towards me seemed to actually be confident. It was taking long, serpentine strokes getting to me. Again, in hindsight, things like a shark or anything else wouldn't take its time, it would go right for you. Whatever this was playing. After a second I was clear-headed enough to start thinking, please be a shark, oh god, please be just a shark or porpoise or a shark, oh god, what is it? It was about a meter away from me when I felt something strong pull me while I remained helpless and screaming. And then I was back on the deck of the 47. Soaking wind but alive. Apparently when the pounding started again, Brown and Kovac came up to make sure I was okay and saw me fall in. They were just quick enough to pull me back up before whatever was in the water got to me. And I did make sure to ask them if they saw the same thing I did. They both got real quiet but didn't say no. After that we all hunkered down in the survivors' compartment. BM2 looked a little better, but he was still clearly out of it. It turns out that last pounding actually did us a favor and ended up inadvertently pushing us toward the mouth of the cove, and not long after that the rescue crew found us. We were all shaken pretty badly and not really able to tell the rescue crew where Mk3 Ford was. All we could do was convince them that he was not in the cove. Not to go back into it to look for him. The ride back was quiet, uneventful, and pensive. I did manage to ask BM2 Rivard something when I noticed he was back with us again. I asked him what it was he saw that made him lose it like he did. He looked me dead in the eye without wavering. He said when whatever it was swam over the flare, he saw its fin. Only it wasn't a fin, because fins aren't long and slender. Fins don't end in 5 fingers, like whatever he saw had. We never found any trace of Ford.
Be 5-year-old me, moved to Canada, living now in a high-rise which faces another high-rise with the same height. First night there, eating some ice cream while playing Game Boy. I cannot sleep, so I look out the window, watching the other building, and notice something. It's on the roof on all fours walking. Its body is large, the stairwell leading up to the roof is behind it, and it's just as big as that box. It is then followed by 2 smaller forms as they seem to morph. They turn into the lion and hyenas from Lion King, and turn towards me as if they knew I was watching, the lion's eyes shining a bright gold as it fucking leaps off the roof at me. I scream, falling back, tripping over my bed and knocking myself out. Wake up to parents worried about me, asking me what happened. Told them I had a nightmare. Knew in my young age they wouldn't believe me kids, and I had nightmares of being in my room staring out my window. The babysat kids stayed in my room, and I would always hear growling and snarling from outside my room. They would all leave the room, leaving me to stare out of the window. It was pitch black save for a few beams of light. Turned to stare into the darkness, seeing the golden eyes of something dart back into the living room. I still have nightmares, but nothing to that level of horror.
Be me, have an Asperger's brother. He's kind of a nutjob. Not in the retarded way, but in the freaky way. Always says pseudo-neo-Nazi shit. Jokes around about killing people. He's in high school, I'm in college, summer break. I decide to go back home to hang out with my family. We go to my brother's room to play video games. His room looks like a pig lived in it. Plates everywhere, crumpled up paper, half-eaten food. I smell something nasty behind the dresser. He goes to the washroom to take a piss. I investigate behind the dresser. There's a fist-sized hole in the wall. I take out my cell phone and use the flashlight option. I start to get sick. There's a severed, rotten hand in the hole, and a knife covered in old, brown, bloodstains. Earlier this year, somebody went missing in this neighborhood. I put 2 and 2 together. My brother comes back. He sees me investigate. He takes out his pocket knife and threatens to kill me and our family if I tell anybody. Past few weeks he tries to keep an eye on me. Summer break is over. Head back to college out of town. Still haven't told anybody.
Okay, this one is not mine, but I want to contribute, so here it goes. Be another anon. Me and my father, along with my uncle and 2 little cousins, 7 and 9 years old, go to a soccer match in my uncle's van. Adults never went to the bathroom in the whole match, and me and my cousins, didn't want to disturb them. Very important match, semifinals, so even though we're pissing ourselves, we don't ask for them to take us to the bathroom. Finally the game is over, hop on the van and head to my uncle's house. Just as we arrive to his house, my 2 cousins run into the house to use the bathroom. My father and my uncle stay in the van talking about the game. Since it wasn't my house, I was gonna wait outside with my father and my uncle until the bathroom was vacant. Just as my 2 cousins enter the house and turn on the lights, we hear them screaming and at the same time glass breaking. We thought someone had entered the house. I get scared and stay in the van. My father and his brother run into the house to see what happened. They find the older kid curled up like a ball crying on the floor. The little one was standing, but he just kept screaming. Father and uncle search the house but find nothing, so they ask the kids what happened. The little one has calmed down now and says that they saw the dog eating cereal from a bowl sitting in the table. Brush it off as nonsense, but there was a broken bowl with cereal on the floor. Try to get information from the oldest one, but he can't even speak. He's just tweaking very bad now. Fast forward 3 days, the older brother hasn't said a fucking word, and the small one just keeps repeating the same dog cereal shit. They hand the little one a piece of paper so he can draw what they saw: the fucking dog sitting on the kitchen table, in a chair, just like a human would do, eating cereal with silverware. The older brother ended up in a psychiatric hospital for nearly 1 year.
Paraphrasing because I didn't save the original Greentext, but it went something like this. Be me, 3 years old, wake up late one night to go to the bathroom. Almost directly across from the bathroom is a guest room with an old antique bed that is raised off the ground that you can see fairly well under. Finish taking a piss and head out the bathroom door, look into guest room and see a little gremlin looking thing under the bed, black eyes, long sharp teeth and claws staring at me. Stare at it for a minute and get excited, wanting to play with it since I'm young and didn't think anything of it at first and it looked like a fairy tale creature. Get excited and wave at it, then it puts its front finger out beckoning me to come closer to it. Start to get really uncomfortable and have a sense of dread come across me. Realize this thing shouldn't fucking exist. Run screaming to my parents' room crying. They check the room and nothing is there. Tell me I'm seeing things. Know what I saw. Sleep in bed with parents for a month before I feel comfortable enough to sleep in my own room again. Years later, little cousins comes over to visit. They're playing in the room and I hear one mention the little man under the bed, freak out and carry them both out of the room in a panic and lock it up. I'd what it was, but that story really stuck with me, freaked me out reading it, and I'm a grown man.
Be me. Be working at gas stations right off the interstate in this small town, like 600 people. Town doesn't even have its own police cops, be like 3 a.m. This gold-colored muscle car comes tearing off the ramp into the parking lot. No one else around. Guy gets out. Long, scraggly brown hair, weathered face, strolls in, walks up to the counter and just stares at me. Sir, can I help you? Do you need cigarettes? Are you lost, sir? She just stands there, staring at me for what seemed like forever. It was just 5 minutes or so. Suddenly, he turns around, and, watching me over his shoulder, starts to walk back to the door. He nods at me once, and exits the building, still staring at me over his should. Guy gets to his car, opens the door and stands there behind the door just staring at me. At this point I'm calling the police, but it will take forever because the town has no cops, so the county sheriff's police must respond. I locked the door, but the building was practically made of glass. Locks weren't going to help. Guy just stands there another 5 minutes staring at me. Finally gets into his car and tears off back up the ramp onto the expressway. Cops arrive, take report, nabbed his plate number for them, and gave them the video recording of the lot from that night. Manager came. It was a big to-do. One of the county deputies used to come into the store and get free coffee, so night. About 3 months later he stopped by. I asked about the report I'd filed about the weird staring guy. Police had stopped him a few miles down the road. He was acting weird, but they didn't really have reason to hold him, so they let him go. Until a week later, my cop friend tells me that the guy from that night was in an accident in another state, killed instantly. Big mess, but in his trunk investigators found a desiccated corpse that turned out to be his long-dead wife. MTW, that corpse was in his trunk the whole time he stared at me.
Be house sitting for my aunt while she's in Europe for my cousin's art gallery or some shit. Aunt lives in a sort of bad part of town in a beautiful motherfucking Victorian built in the 1860s. Bring her with me to house sit for a week because what the fuck would the point be if I wasn't armed? Fading in and out of sleep on couch one night, hear window and basement chatter, insta awake, insta on feet, are in hands, flashlight on, go into basement slowly, tactically slicing pie with light on strobe, nothing in basement, look for broken window or glass or something, nothing. Suddenly the scream of 1,000 burning humans fills my ear as if it were 3 inches away from my head. I'm talking banshee status. I freaked the motherfuck out, ND'd into the staircase and ran upstairs, out of the house and stood on the sidewalk for a good hour, eventually grow balls and grab phone from kitchen and call aunt. Is this place haunted? Oh yeah, never go in the basement if you hear glass break, MFW. Turned out the guy that built the house tortured his wife or something down there and beat her and neglected her until she died of starvation or some shit.
Okay, so this happened like 2 years ago, but it kind of scared me. Be me, 22 living with my parents, sister and my little doggy, 2 years with GF. She and her sister always had this kind of bad luck to attract the paranormal. They always told me their backyard was very crowded at 3 a.m. They are kind of used to it. One day, I'm in a room having a phone call with GF. It's like 2 a.m. She likes to call me a lot. Start hearing footsteps and some kind of marbles rolling just above me, on the roof. Freak out and tell GF. Try to calm down and stay alert in case it's some guy trying to get in the house. Footsteps and marbles still out there. Nothing else happens. 6 a.m. Didn't sleep shit. Gotta go to work. Next days are exactly the same. It's Monday, 2 a.m. Phone call with GF. Closing the backyard door and front door. Parents, sister and doggo are sleeping. Start hearing the noises again. Nope the fuck out to my room. Get pissed and start yelling. Hey you faggot, why don't you fucking show up? Show yourself? You think I'm scared of you? Nothing happens. Suddenly my bedroom's door gets fucking smacked. Open immediately. No one is outside. Check parents and sister's rooms. Nothing. I recently moved with my GF to the big city, but last time I visited my parents' house the noises and footsteps were still there.
Not necessarily creepy, but supernatural nonetheless. Be me. Obsessed with my partner, like I was under a love spell. She practiced satanic spells, but besides the point. She wanted to break up with me. Decided I was gonna kill myself that day, went to take a nap, and when she's gone at work was gonna hang myself. Had a dream about this pretty black-haired girl that was telling me not to kill myself. She then changed to a zoomed-up rotting corpse that I couldn't look away. She told me she died from pain relating to her throat. Face was all mangled, green, flaky, skin partially clinging onto the moldy skull and dried ooze around where her eyes were supposed to be. Wake up fucking horrified. Didn't kill myself. I felt like I snapped out of the spell I was in. Told my ex about the dream but not the suicide part. Ex's face went completely pale. Asked what's wrong. That was my ex-girlfriend. She died from cancer 4 years ago. Not making this up. She saved my life, even though I never knew her when she was alive. I sometimes wonder why she helped, but I'm glad she did.
Be 6 years old, wake up deep in the night in my room. Everything is covered in a hazy yellowish mist, sickly yellowish, it's hot, extremely humid. Mom, I standing at the door to my room, bare naked, typing a shirt across the doorway, from one end to the other. Mom. What are you doing? Tells me it can't get me, she won't let it. Hear what sounds like a lion growling in the deep black of the hall behind her. She tells me she has to go now and that she loves me. Immediately begin to cry because this is all very wrong. She turns and walks into the growling darkness of the hall. I'll get out of bed and run to the door, but I see something out in the hall. A massive, insectal face with many eyes in the darkness. I wake up the next morning thinking it was all a dream. House full of relatives, police and ambulance. Mom died of a heart attack in the night. She was only 25 and had no family history of heart problems. Dad was sitting at table, screaming and crying. Never seen him get like that. Dad moved away when I was 13. My aunt and uncle adopted me. He remarried and had 3 kids with his new wife. Haven't seen or spoken to him since I was 16. I'm 27 now.
Gateway of the Mind. In 1983, a team of deeply pious scientists conducted a radical experiment in an undisclosed facility. The scientists had theorized that a human without access to any senses or ways to perceive stimuli would be able to perceive the presence of God. They believed that the 5 senses clouded our awareness of eternity, and without them, a human could actually establish contact with God by thought. An elderly man who claimed to have nothing left to live for was the only test subject to volunteer. To purge him of all his senses, the scientists performed a complex operation in which every sensory nerve connection to the brain was surgically severed. Although the test subject retained full muscular function, he could not see, hear, taste, smell, or feel. With no possible way to communicate with or even sense the outside world, he was alone with his thoughts. Scientists monitored him as he spoke aloud about his state of mind in jumbled, slurred sentences that he couldn't even hear. After 4 days, the man claimed to be hearing hushed, unintelligible voices in his head. Assuming it was an onset of psychosis, the scientists paid little attention to the man's concerns. 2 days later, the man cried that he could hear his dead wife speaking with him, and even more, he could communicate back. The scientists were intrigued, but were not convinced until the subject started naming dead relatives of the scientists. He repeated personal information to the scientists that only their dead spouses and parents would have known. At this point, a sizable portion of scientists left the study. After a week of conversing with the deceased through his thoughts, the subject became distressed, saying the voices were overwhelming. In every waking moment, his consciousness was bombarded by hundreds of voices that refused to leave him alone. He frequently threw himself against the wall, trying to elicit a pain response. He begged the scientists for sedatives, so he could escape the voices by sleeping. This tactic worked for 3 days, until he started having severe night terrors. The subject repeatedly said that he could see and hear the deceased in his dreams. Only a day later, the subject began to scream and claw at his non-functional eyes, hoping to sense something in the physical world. The hysterical subject now said the voices of the dead were deafening and hostile, speaking of hell and the end of the world. At one point, he yelled no heaven, no forgiveness for 5 hours straight. He continually begged to be killed, but the scientists were convinced that he was close to establishing contact with God. After another day, the subject could no longer form coherent sentences. Seemingly mad, he started to bite off chunks of flesh from his arm. The scientists rushed into the test chamber and restrained him to a table so he could not kill himself. After a few hours of being tied down, the subject halted his struggling and screaming. He stared blankly at the ceiling as teardrops silently streaked across his face. For 2 weeks, the subject had to be manually rehydrated due to the constant crying. Eventually, he turned his head and, despite his blindness, made focused eye contact with a scientist for the first time in the study. He whispered, "I have spoken with God, and he has abandoned us," and his vital signs stopped. There was no apparent cause of death.
Imagine being stranded in deep, open water at night. Already you're terrified of drowning, drowning while getting eaten, when you see a pinpoint of light off in the distance. In the absence of other sights, this flickering seaborne star captures your full attention. Is it a boat in the far distance? Should you call out? Could your cries possibly carry that far against the open sea? Will the noise draw nothing more than sharp teeth from the depths? Muscling down your fear, you call out, "Hey! Over here. I'm Heeeeeeeeeere. Heeeeeeeeeelp." You wish with all your might that your life jacket had come with flares, a flashlight, anything. Wait, is it just your imagination, or does the light seem closer now, like just maybe it's changed course? You thank a God you're not even sure you believe in that you've been heard. Surely that's what it is. Some sailor having a smoke topside heard you and has alerted the helmsman. They're searching for you like a hound casting about for a scent. You loose another volley of shouts, joyous laughter creeping into them from around the edges. And oh, that light is definitely closer now, close enough that you can now discern that. No, that can't be right. There are two lights now. Well, maybe they were so far away at first that you simply couldn't distinguish one from the other. Do boats have headlights like cars? That's almost what it looks like. Headlights. Or eyes.
Okay guys, this happened to me last night and I haven't been able to sleep since. I was hesitant to post about it on /x/ because I've been looking for some sort of explanation or something, trying to see what it was I saw outside now that it's light out, but I cannot, and it's scaring the shit out of me. I usually just frequent /b//mul and /lit/, so excuse me if this is something you guys have some explanation for already. Please just tell me there's a realistic explanation for this and that what happened is common. I'm fucking terrified. Get home from work greater than it's almost midnight. When the door opens, the home security thing does a high-pitched beep 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 chime. In my kitchen eating a late dinner before going to bed, hear a door open and then the home thing go beep beep beep, but it definitely sounds like it came from outside. I'm sitting right by the back door, so I go check the front door. The front door has a screen door, a wood door that leads to a small entry room, then a second door inside that leads up the stairs into the house. These are loud-ass old doors. Did not hear screen door open, did not hear main door close, did not hear second door open. The door is still double locked. No other doors are opened. Nobody is standing outside. Okay, maybe it was the neighbor's door. Maybe they have the same system. Hear it again. Sounds like it's coming from outside the front of the house. Look out the window. Looks like a deer is crawling on the yard with its belly to the ground. Stands up on its back legs. Makes the door opening /beeping sound with its head raised up to the air. It is not a deer. It looks like a guy with deer legs. Too dark to see what the fuck is going on. 5 hoom. What _the_fuck.gif. Lee M hoom. Sounds like a dog barking I'm home while trying to vomit. Starts galloping away across the street. Beep beep beep. Starts shaking. It's raining out at the time. The thing opens its mouth and holds its head up. Thing starts digging furiously at the grass across the street with its front arms/legs/things. Puts head near the hole like it's looking inside. Keeps walking down street. Beep beep beep. 5 hoom. Puts head back to drink rain. Digs at ground. Keeps doing this down the block before galloping away down Division away from the city. I do not live in a rural area. The deer population typically stays down towards Melrose Park off of Thatcher by the river. I live just outside of Chicago, literally a block west of the city limits. I have never seen anything like this or heard of anything like this. I am fucking shitting myself right now. I was going to post this story on /b/ but I avoid /b/ like the plague unless I'm bored. It's summertime and I just get memed on left and right, and this seems more paranormal than anything else. I've been Googling for similar stories and trying to find some sort of typical scientific explanation for this sort of thing, but I can't even find any sort of similar story. My instinct is crazy homeless guy, but its legs bent back like a deer's. It was not built like a human being, and it was definitely not wearing clothes and looked like it had a full body of fur. I don't use drugs. I was not tired. I was 100% lucid, and I'm fucking horrified. Please say there is a common explanation for shit like this.
This happened a couple of days ago, but first some context. Late 2016, cat has just had one eye removed because of a tumor. He starts losing weight fast, gets especially thinner around his hips, cannot control his stool. Vet says he has a massive tumor in his stomach, have to put kitty down now. Polish folklore says that the spirits of the dead can appear and that animals can talk around Christmas. First Christmas Day, lie in my bed, trying to read a book, had just read quite some /x/threads. Keep noticing a kind of flickering out of the corner of my eye, Immediately think it is an evil spirit. The thing appears to be standing on two legs, has the length of a small child, between 70 to 90 centimeters, appears to be looking intently at me. Try to think about ways to deal with the spirit, decide not to anger it, treat it with respect. Mentally recite mantras like I respect you, and you respect me as host of the house. Suddenly a kind of flash, two bright, yellow eyes have flashed at me, turn onto my stomach, think about what it was, turn back around, see a large, ruddy cat-like shade take a few steps across my desk and disappear, realize kitty came to visit, feeling of bliss comes over me, sleep like a baby, MFW.
B15, with same-age cousin and bros all within a year of each other. Go into the woods to be manly like we do, have normal supplies. Axe, hatchets, knives, matches, etc., getting laid in woods. But we be extra manly, as 15-year-olds like to pretend to be. Finally decide the bugs are too much time to head in. On way back there is a pretty androgynous looking person on our trail. Just standing there in tom clothes. Hey, you lost. We can lead you out if you want. Starts doing this heaving motion, like dry heaving but lifting their elbows too. Very unnatural looking. What the fuck are you doing? Heaving stops, opens mouth and just screams bloody fucking murder. Today I would have ran, but we were all posturing like 15-year-olds do, plus we were stocked with lethal weapons and there was like 9 of us. All weapons raised in defense mode. Screaming stops after like 30 seconds, cricks head unnaturally, like they do in almost every possession movie, and smiles at us. Get the fuck away from us. Runs off into the woods. Strangely can't hear its footsteps after it disappears in first layer of brush greater than nope out of the woods. We didn't go back to the woods for like 3 weeks.
I live in a semi-rural community in the Sonoran Desert, Arizona. So basically there are houses around mine and we are surrounded by desert wilderness and mountains. So here's the story: windy but clear night in the desert, no street lights but it's a full moon and there's plenty of porch lights, clear visibility, sitting on my roof where there's a deck and shares looking across the desert. Power lines are buzzing abnormally loud and make this bizarre tethery noise, reminded me of Twin Peaks. Light up a cigarette, no other drugs in me, hear a trash can tip over down the street, look that direction and see this shadowy shape, about as tall as in 1 to 250, darting from shadow to shadow. I'm spooked but it's not close enough to be sure it's real. See it dart into my neighbor's backyard. Their horses go crazy and make a fuckload of noise but my neighbors don't seem to be home. Can't see the thing because it's mostly dark in their yard. Suddenly see it dart behind our shop in our yard. It was as tall as our truck and 100% humanoid as it moved towards the shop. Very spooked now and my dog is losing his shit inside the house. Sit there a long time frozen. Finally go downstairs and get on with my night. Still windy as fuck. About go to bed. Suddenly hear footsteps run across my roof like I was in signs or some shit. Hear my mom say, "Oh my god, I think an animal just jumped off our roof." Spook.jpg. Still fell asleep and never saw it again.
Yeah, this was between Lahore and Faisalabad, Pakistan. This is the only spooky thing to have happened to me personally as far as I know, but a few friends and family members have told me stuff that happened to them. A girl I was briefly acquainted with told me this one. B-girl, hanging out with cousins in old ancestral home, watching a movie, male cousin goes to make popcorn, movie starts, girl and other cousins sitting on couches, male cousin comes back and sits on the couch next to girl asks cousin where the popcorn is, cousin doesn't reply, keeps staring slightly to the right of the TV screen, cousin walks into the room with popcorn, sees himself sitting on the couch, girl looks over and realizes there's 2 of them, cousin looking thing turns face towards girl and starts smiling, smile keeps widening, so wide it should have gone off the face but it gets distorted and seems both contained by the face and yet wrapping around to the back of the head. Actual cousin drops the popcorn and yells, the thing disintegrates sideways and fades away. Like a transition effect in a PowerPoint presentation. Smile is the last thing to go, sounds kind of like a mix of the Western Skinwalker and a standard poltergeist.
Weirdest shit I saw when I was doing rescue shit in the bush in Australia. Some bushwalker got lost late at night. We found their camp abandoned and signs where they ran in a hurry. Their tent was also slashed. After about an hour of tracking them through the bush, we find them just standing there in the open, completely frozen. They didn't acknowledge us calling to them, or react to our torches. There was 4 of us. I'll call them John, Jack, Jake, and me. Jake didn't want anything to do with this dude, he was freaked out. Jack walks up to the dude to offer him a piercing screech and then both the dude and Jack were gone. All that was left was the bottle that Jack dropped. We all legged it back to the trail, we somehow got separated. Radio wasn't working either. 2 hours later I somehow stumble across our vehicle even though I was pretty sure I was never heading in the right direction for it. I get in, lock the doors, and wait until morning. Morning comes, and I return to the place where Jack went missing. The bottle was still there, all of our tracks were missing, and nobody was responding to their radio. John and Jake are still missing to this day. So is Jack, but I swear I've seen him stalking me recently from afar at night.
Live right by the woods, backyard merges into woods. One summer I was in the habit of going for a walk a few hours before sunset, usually came back as it was turning dark. One night I stayed at one of my spots for an hour or two after it got dark. Family got concerned. Dad shouted my name from the backyard at the tree line a few times, barely heard him and returned home, busy for next 2 days and don't go for my walk. The next time I went for my walk everything was like normal, hang out a while at one of my spots. It gets dark. Right before it's about to get completely pitch black I get up to leave when I hear something that gave me the weirdest shock. It was my dad's voice shouting my name, but it wasn't coming from the direction of our property, it was coming from deeper in the woods. It called again, greater than Dave. Dave? Just like my dad would call for me, basically freak out internally standing in one spot. I know for a fact my dad is actually working late and won't be home till much later. There's no way in hell he'd just randomly be in the woods and calling me. Once the complete impossibility of it really happening hits me I take off running at top speed, couldn't see anything, still legging it like my life depended on it, felt like I was flying down the trails, somehow my feet knew every little ditch, rock, branch, etc. Finally get home, heart is pounding like crazy, calm down a little, out of breath ask my mom, is dad home? She says what? I told you earlier he is working late. He won't be home till 2 to 3 a.m. Never tell her or anyone else in the family what happened, never stayed in the woods after dark again.
This happened when I was like 4 and it still gives me chills thinking about it. Camping with dad in the woods near our house, live near a huge national park so we have tons of places to go, decide we're gonna make a trip of it and hike in a ways. From the time we parked until we stopped for lunch, we didn't hear or see a single soul, we were completely isolated. Stopped to have lunch near an old riverbed, I start to get this weird feeling. I look over to see if dad feels it too. He looks slightly worried, something just didn't feel right, it felt like we were being watched. Suddenly on the opposite side of the riverbed a woman appears from the bushes, she's wearing jogging clothing and sneakers, she's smiling really big at us. Hi! She calls at us, dad doesn't answer, I'm looking for my daughter. She doesn't say this in a worried way, though, more like a mildly annoyed way. I've been looking all over for her. Have you seen her? No. My dad says, she sort of hesitates, never stops smiling. Hi. I'm looking for my daughter. She's gotten off somewhere, can you help me look for her? What? I'm thoroughly shitting bricks at this point. Dad says no again. More firmly this time, the woman just stands there, smiling at us. Dad says we need to go. We pack up our stuff and the whole time he keeps an eye on her. Sometimes she calls stuff like hi. And have you seen my daughter anywhere? Finally packed up and ready to go, Dad checks my pack. Turns to check on her, she's fucking gone. Never heard her leave. We get the hell out of there and back to the car as fast as possible. The thing about it that was so fucked, aside from the whole thing, was that she was wearing sneakers and jogging shorts. We were deep in backcountry. There is absolutely no way she got there in those clothes.
Fuck it, postin'. Before I begin, just know, I'm a stranger on the internet. My word is worth exactly bunk. But that also means I have no reason to lie. What am I gonna look cool on fucking 4chan? This is exactly what happened to the letter. Summer 2013, drinking with a few bros. Something about lights over a park an hour away. Laugh it off as small town news. Someone gets the idea to camp there for shits and giggles. LM down. A week later we get our schedules lined up and head out. Bros drinking and smoking. I had a drug test coming up and can't stomach beer unless I'm feeling 100%. So spend the night sober, skip to 3 a.m. Bros are slowly dropping off, going to their own tents, but I'm still wide awake. Walk around the forest trails to burn some energy. See a few people walking around, but considering the lights in the sky shit, I wasn't surprised. Eventually start walking parallel to another guy about 40 feet away. Too many trees between our paths to see anything but the green jacket he was wearing. Haha, hey, he's got the same jacket with the shelves rolled up too. Walk to a street that was fairly well lit. Glance over at my walking buddy. Same jacket. Same shorts, shoes, hair, glasses, down to the fucking Majora's Mask tattoo. That fucker was me. He looks up, we lock eyes. As I'm trying to process what the fuck I was looking at, he starts making a beeline towards me. 4 years of track and field kick in and I run like I've never run before. Hit the campsite in about 2 minutes. Throw open my car door and smoke an entire pack of cigarettes. Eventually bros start waking up. Never tell anyone. Lie and say I just woke up despite being paper white with flushed cheeks and bags under my eyes.
This happened an hour ago. I'm shaken. I live on the coast of SC. My backyard directly leads to marsh in an open field, surrounded by woodland. I woke up to get a glass of water downstairs. I kept having this feeling, as if something were off. So I went to find my mother, who's someone who tends to stay up late, going about chores. I went to the backyard and saw her about 100 yards from the back door facing the marsh. I called out to her but she didn't hear me, so I walked out to her. Once I started getting close, she turned to face me, but something about the way she looked was off, so I asked her if anything was wrong. At this point, I was about 30 feet from her and she started walking towards me. The fucking back door opens and I turned to see my mom standing on the deck, and she called out to me asking what I'm doing. I never ran so fast in my life. As I looked back to the marsh, I could see that thing booking it for the woods. It looked just like my mother. I yelled at mom to go inside, as there was something out there. I told her what I saw and I've been crying and I can't stop shaking. What the fuck just happened? Did something try to lure me out to the marsh? I must be losing my damn mind, but I know what I saw.
Be me. Kicked out of home when I graduated high school, didn't have any close friends I could crash with, police regularly checked places homeless people would sleep and harass them, was really good at going out, never did learn how to catch my own food, set up a camp about a quarter mile innawoods so I could go into town whenever I needed. Winter hits for those closer to the equator. Michigan winters are terrible if you have to live with only a campfire, practically starved for 2 weeks. Only thing on my mind at any moment was food of all kinds, especially meats. Would have killed for a rare steak, started legitimately considering kidnapping somebody else so I could eat them, constantly at war with my hunger and my unwillingness to kill another human being to sate it. One night I had enough of only getting mediocre amounts of food from dumpster diving, sitting by campfire, preparing myself for what I'm about to do. A random guy comes out of nowhere and sits across the campfire from me. Looks like Indian Doom guy. I know what you want to do, but trust me, once you cross that line there is no coming back. Once that happens, I will come for you. Leaves. I'm shitting my pants. That one experience convinced me to try to get a house, and I eventually succeeded. I haven't seen him since, but I am sincerely thankful he came into my life when I needed it most.
All this shit started when I found that little note. On a square piece of paper I found at the bottom of a box I was moving out of my basement. It read, "Hello? Please respond." I had no idea how long the paper had been there. Those boxes had sat in my basement since I moved in. I ignored it until the next morning, when I opened my coffee maker to throw out the grounds, and inside was a sopping wet piece of paper that read, "Please respond. Please help." I figured it must have been put inside my coffee maker by whoever was pulling this pointless prank, because it wasn't there when I put my coffee grounds in. I found more notes, under my mousepad, inside my computer tower while I was putting in some new RAM, between the layers of tissue of my toilet paper roll, under my DVD player's disc tray. Places that no one would ever look. Places you'd never think of putting a note. Places you knew no one would ever look, and it would be foolish to put a note, because who knew when they would see it? But it kept happening, and they all said the same thing every time, begging me to respond and help them. Being the retard I am, one day I just got fed up when I found one inside a cup in my dishwasher. Night after I had run it, the paper was dry. I wrote on the back of it, "Hello. I'm responding. Please explain your situation," and slid it under a crack in my bath-fitted tub. No sooner had I left my bathroom did I find another piece of paper, floating on the surface tension on the surface of my glass of Sprite I had in the living room. I carefully picked it out of my drink. It read, "Thank you." And in larger letters, "I'm trapped." I waved it around to dry it off a bit, and wrote on the back of it again, "Where are you trapped? How are you sending me notes?" And, not creative enough to think of where to put it, I just threw it behind my couch. I waited and looked, but I didn't see any other notes for the rest of that day. The next day I checked my mail. Inside of some spam letter was the next note, in the second dimension. "Below you." I wasted no time in responding. "Whoever you are, this prank is retarded. Give it a rest," and threw it outside. The wind blew it away. The next note I got was still in obnoxious capital letters. though it was much longer than before and the last sentence seemed to have been squeezed into the remaining space. I think it was a passage from some encyclopedia or textbook. The first dimension is a defined point in space. The second dimension, this was underlined, is anything that exists with height and width, while the third adds on length. The fourth includes time, and the fifth is the past time that has already occurred and is solidified in timespace. Everything beyond that was too squished in to read. I rolled my eyes and responded again, how can you read this if you're in the second dimension? How can you even exist? I slipped this note into the space in my toaster between the element and the metal casing. My reply came when I brushed it out of my hair the next morning before I took a shower. Writing is 2D. Vision is 2D, 2D images superimposed. That didn't really get to the point of how I was supposed to rescue this person, which defined in my next note that I flushed down my toilet. Make me 3D was all that was on the new slip of paper I found inside of a chocolate bar unwrapped, later on. How the idiot was putting these inside sealed products was beyond me, but at this point I decided to play along. Maybe it was some kind of TV show thing. How? Was all I wrote for my reply. I remember exactly where I put it, because it was the last thing I wrote for a long time. I put it in a crack between my length mirror and its wooden backing. As soon as I let go it slid out of sight and I didn't see any papers again for a year and a half. Getting dressed one morning for work, I went into my room and adjusted my tie and shirt in my mirror, the same one, only it was now on the opposite side of my room. Looking into it, I noticed a square behind me on the wall. Turning around, there was none. In the instant before I turned around again I thought it must have fallen off, but in the mirror it was still there, still sucked to the wall. I touched my mirror thinking maybe it was some sort of warping or optical illusion, but it wasn't. I lifted my heavy mirror up from the ground and slowly walked backwards with it, nearing myself to the opposite wall on which the paper was stuck. The closer I got, the clearer the message on it became, until I stopped, sandwiched between the heavy mirror and the wall, looking at the paper immediately over my shoulder. Make you 2D, it said. I moved the fuck out of that house as soon as I could. After bunking at my girlfriend's for a while, I got the fuck rid of the mirror, the toaster, everything. My heart still skips a beat when I see any perfectly square piece of paper, sitting on the floor, all alone. I still live in fear of someday I'll open up a book or look in the inner lining of a jacket, and a piece of paper will flop out. I check all my things, now. Constantly. I also don't drink coffee anymore.
In the mirror normally you sleep soundly, but the thunderstorm raging outside is stirring you from your sleep. You begin to doze, then another crash jolts you awake. The cycle lasts most of the night. So you lay there, eyes open and outward, looking at your room stretching out before you in oblong shadows. Your eyes move from nameless object to object, until you reach your mirror, sitting adjacent to you across the room. Suddenly a flash of lighting, and the mirror flickers in illumination. For a scant second the mirror revels to you dozens of faces, silhouettes within its frame, mouths open and eyes blackened. They stare out at you, their black pupils fixed upon your face. Then it is done. Are you sure of what you have seen? Unsettled, you don't sleep for the rest of the evening. The next morning you remove the mirror from your wall and toss it in the trash. It didn't matter if the vision you had seen was of truth or falsehood, you wanted to be rid of that mirror. In fact, you scrap every mirror in your house. Weeks pass and the event of that night falls into passive memory. You are spending the day at a friend's house and it's time to use the bathroom. While you are in there the faucet starts to run without you prompting it. Taken aback by this, you do not yet act, trying to reason with your paranoia in your mind. The water starts to steam and a skin of moisture covers the mirror up above. You're watching intently as words form, "Please return the mirrors. We miss watching you sleep at night."
If you are the type who eats out regularly, one day a stranger might join you at the table. This stranger will always appear to be of your age and sex, and he, if it is a he, will only appear if you are alone. No matter what style of restaurant it is, he will always be carrying his own plate of food. After a few seconds, he will look directly at you and say, "You seem like an interesting person. May I know you better?" Say yes, and he will begin to ask you questions about yourself in between bites. These questions will be innocuous enough at first, what your name is, what you do for a living, and so forth, but should you open your mouth to answer, you will be forced to tell the truth, even if you do not consciously know what the truth is. Remain silent, and the stranger will scowl at you, pick up his plate, and leave. You will never see him again. If you do indulge his questions, however, they will grow darker and darker as the food leaves his plate, and it will become harder and harder to resist answering. Do not attempt to leave the table before he does under any circumstances. When his plate is clean, he will stand up to leave, but not before asking you one last, irresistible question: what would drive you to take your own life? You will instantly be aware that you will be able to lie in response to this one question, and I suggest you do, for whatever you describe will come to pass within a week. Those who are canny may use this chat to gain whatever they desire, but know that if the happenstance you name does not drive you to suicide, the stranger will start guessing as to what will. And consider how much he now knows about you.
Sunshine Man Part 1. My memory is hazy, but I think I pieced together what happened. Last week I called my wife. I told her not to drive to work but to get a ride, that I was buying her a new car and would pick her up from work in it. She was ecstatic. I was broke and her car ran fine, and I was kind of confused when I hung up the phone. I decided to do this in the moment. I went to the dealership, picked out the one she was eyeing and brought it to her. She was very happy, but our finances were tighter now. I sold the old car on Craigslist and a guy came to test drive it. He didn't come back. I figured he stole it, so I called the police. The police found the car wrapped around a tree a few minutes from our house. The brakes had gone out. It hit me a little then. I remember a shining light and feeling horrible the night before I bought the car. I shared this experience online and came up with a name, the Sunshine Man. Basically, whatever the fuck this thing is, comes into your house and warns you of something bad about to happen. All the advice on him says you won't remember exactly what happened but will heed the warning subconsciously. Every story was bad and begged people to not heed the advice, that the price he asks for his help is much worse. This made no sense to me. How could I ignore advice I don't remember getting that night he came to me and I do remember? Sunshine Man Part 2. I wake up in the middle of the night with my eyes burning. The room is blisteringly lighted, it's almost impossible to see and it is cold, almost freezing in the room. I look over and my wife is sleeping. I see a figure moving, the light pulsing from him slowly like water. I feel it burning my skin, but I am shivering. He spoke to me and it sounded like metal on metal, but somehow I understood. Put the little girl next door in your car, drive to the edge of town and put her in the trunk. Walk home and we will be even. The thing stared at me, drifting closer to me without moving its legs. I felt it grab me and it was ice cold, but I began to blister. I jerked away and it pulsed brighter than ever, then was gone. The room was dark and warm and I didn't sleep that night. I considered it, I'm not going to lie to you, but I'm not a monster. I left the cute 7-year girl next door alone and ignored my meeting with the Sunshine Man for several weeks, convincing myself it was a dream. I read more online and it seemed about a third of the people in similar situations did what the Sunshine Man asked. Most were simple tasks. Break a vase, poison a dog. None were as bad as mine. But, if the Sunshine Man saved my wife's life, he did a lot more for me than most people. Most were saved from something like losing a job or getting robbed. Several of the people said they didn't do the task and were left alone, so I felt safe. One person gave the theory that the Sunshine Man would undo your good luck if you didn't do his request. I'm done writing and worrying about this though. I'm about to go to a concert of my favorite band, for free. A friend at my wife's work gave her the tickets she had bought for her and her husband when her husband refused to go for no reason. Their loss, our gain. Smiley face. End.